As Napoleon was making his over a month-long journey back to France, he was isolated from any news. Suddenly, in September and October, France achieved a great military turnaround. General Masséna had fended off Austrians and Russians at Zurich by the end of September, and General Brunn defeated the Duke of York in the Netherlands by the start of October. The pressure was suddenly off. As Napoleon arrived in France, the Republic did not seem to need saving in a military sense. For months, the various politicians, generals, and factions had been plotting the Directory's overthrow, and now when Napoleon arrived, everything sort of paused. All eyes were on the victor of Italy, the conqueror of Egypt, the most successful general of the Revolution. Who would he side with? Napoleon had a Jacobin past. He was friends with Robespierre's younger brother. There was hope that his old sympathies might reawaken. Then again, he wasn't a radical. He had an unusually tempered attitude towards the hated Catholic Church. He had friends and allies in the Directory, but would he go with them after they had lost all that he had won for France? Sieyes had been searching for a so-called sword for months. He had already discounted Generals Augereau and Juron as too Jacobin to even consider. General Brunn and Masséna were still on the front, General Joubert was dead, and General Bernadotte, the Minister of War, was sitting on the fence, avoiding any sort of firm commitments. In October, Sieyes had gone back to charming General Moreau when news arrived that Napoleon had come back to France. Upon hearing the news, Moreau told Sieyes, "That is your man." After weeks of meeting with intermediaries, neither man was willing to go begging personally to the other. Sieyes and Napoleon finally met and arranged a plan. It's true that Napoleon was also meeting with other people. He was, after all, the most popular man in France right now, and there's no doubt that others wanted him to join their plot. But Sieyes was the one Napoleon chose to side with. Now, what the two conspirators needed were other conspirators. Napoleon's brothers, Joseph and Lucien, were a given. Many of the staff with which Napoleon returned from Egypt were as well. They did not have time to get entangled with politics. So the generals Murat, Berryer, Marmont, and Lannes, and others were instantly at Napoleon's side. He was also joined by General MacDonald, who just recently received a pummeling in Italy. Sieyes arranged the politicians. He and Foreign Minister Talleyrand had been planning a coup for months. Talleyrand was recently removed, but he was not out of political influence. Director Ducos was on Sieyes' side. The last linchpin was the Minister of Police, Fouché. He went along, but with a Jacobin background there was a risk that he could turn at any moment. To be quite honest, there was a risk that anyone involved in this could turn at any moment. After some short-term planning, the coup began on the 8th of November. Step 1. Sieyes and Ducos would convince the directors, or the majority of directors, meaning themselves and Barras, to resign, causing a constitutional crisis. Barras did so, after a presumably hefty bribe, while Moulin and Gauffier were put under house arrest. We can safely presume that Sieyes and Ducos managed to convince themselves to resign quite easily. Step 2. The same night, an emergency meeting of the Council of the Ancients, of select members of the Council of the Ancients, would be held in order to summon both chambers to debate the constitutional crisis the next day. For added safety, the debates would be moved away from Paris to the Palace of Saint-Cloud, so that no faction could use the Parisian mob to intimidate the legislators. For this purpose, Napoleon was also named commander of the army in the wider area of Paris, with a duty to secure Saint-Cloud. Step 3. Pressure the legislators into dissolving the Directory and voting for a new constitution. This was going to be the hardest part. You may wonder why all these steps were necessary, why all this legal theater. Well, neither Sieyes or Napoleon or most of their supporters wanted an obvious overthrow. They wanted to avoid a civil war. They also believed that legal legitimacy was necessary for any new regime that would replace the old one. So a pressured, peaceful, non-violent overthrow was desirable. We'll see how that goes on day 2 of the proceedings next time.